Hi, you guys. I decided to do it like this for the reason that I told you, but also because I think it's a little bit easier to have more agency to control a Google slide presentation when it's your responsibility to take some notes on it. And so if you haven't already done so, you have to open up the note-taking sheet on Classroom so that you can take some notes as you're doing this Ed puzzle. So there may be questions through the Ed puzzle. There's a couple of links that I'm going to share that I want you to explore, but ultimately you should be taking your notes on the note-taking sheet. And today is primarily designed just to give you some of the vocabulary that you're going to have to use as we move through the rest of the population unit. And don't forget, there's going to be a vocab quiz over a lot of these terms, and you'll understand them better once we practice with them a little bit more. And I hope you enjoy my silly joke. I don't know. Okay, so now that we know, just move my face just a little bit. Now that we know where people live and why they're living there, or more importantly, why there's some areas of the world where people don't live, now we can start getting into the idea of population growth and decline, which is really what we're sort of going to focus on for the remainder of this unit. So again, this is just a bunch, we're just going to talk vocabulary today. So you're going to want to take some notes while I'm going over this. So there's really three different things that impact growth, whether it's population growth or decline. The first thing is fertility. And so how many babies are being born into a given population will sort of determine how large or small the population is. And so the way in which you guys are going to measure fertility is by looking at the concept of total fertility rate. And some of these terms I've actually introduced to you in the development unit, so we're reviewing just a little bit as well. So total fertility rate is the average number of children born per woman during her childbearing years. So that's between the ages of 16 and 49. Another concept that's connected to fertility is this idea of replacement fertility rate, which is exactly like it sounds. So if a woman has 2.1 children, then she's basically replaced her and the father of the child. So two parents, two kids, replacement rate, it's 2.1 because fractions are weird when you're dividing population. I don't know, math. So when you have an RNI of 2.1, your population growth is stable. You're not growing and you're not declining. It's just staying stable. And actually, that's where most populations want to be. We'll talk more about this when we look at population pyramids. The other way that population can be measured in terms of growth or decline is by death rates. So how many people are actually dying in a population? And there's a couple of different measures for this, and we'll talk about one here and then another on the next slide. So you can look at infant mortality rate, which is a sad rate, but it's the number of children who die before their first birthday per 1,000 lives. So infant mortality rate tends to be higher in periphery countries, tends to be lower in core countries. Other related vocabulary to mortality is life expectancy. So you can look at how many people in a population are dying versus how long people are living. Because if people are living longer, then you're going to see population increase as well. But you're also going to see higher death rates, which is kind of weird because when you have a really old population, it means that your death rate is higher because the majority of your population is old. So again, we'll talk more about this when we look at population pyramids. And then the last thing that you need to look at when you're trying to figure out how fast or slow a population is growing is migration. So you have to look at the people coming into a country and the people leaving a country, which could dramatically impact population growth. Like we have a net in migration in the United States. And actually our population would be shrinking if we didn't allow so many immigrants, because immigrants tend to have more children, particularly if they're from Central and South America. Okay, so just maps because it's geography. So total fertility rate. There's going to be a question on your handout to take a look at this map. So if you just want to pause the video, you can and answer the question. Now, the other thing that's really important when we're talking about population growth and or decline is rate of natural increase. So how fast the actual population is growing. So fertility rate, mortality rate, and migration influence population growth and decline, but rate of natural increase tells us how fast a population is growing. So there's a couple more statistics that you're going to need in order to determine how fast or slow a population is growing. And that's crude birth rate and crude death rate. So you take the number of people born in a population per 1,000, the number of people who die in any given population per 1,000, and then you subtract them from one another. So you take crude birth rate minus crude death rate, and that gives you how fast or slow the population is growing. And if the number is positive, so if crude birth rate is higher than crude death rate, then you're going to see an increase in population. If it's like 2.1, like the replacement rate that we just talked about, so the same number of babies that are being born equals the same number of people that are dying, then you're going to see stable population growth or zero population growth, ZPG we call it. And then if you have more people dying than people are being born, then this number is going to be negative, which means you're going to see a shrinking population. So if we look at RNI from the perspective of scale, like we did the other day in class, you can take a look at this map and you can see that like the United States, like I just mentioned, is sort of in that like 0 to 10 range. So our population is growing pretty slowly. And again, if we didn't have so many people who are migrating to this country, then we would actually be in that sort of on our way to this like darkish blue area right here, which is not where we want to be. Sorry, I didn't mean to press enter, but that's okay. We can leave that. So there are certainly areas of the world that are seeing decreases in their population. So Eastern Europe, mostly for migration reasons. Japan, mostly because young people just aren't having babies. And then other areas for a variety of reasons. But most of the highest population growth, the fastest growing populations are going to be in sub-Saharan Africa and other periphery countries, and then somewhere in the middle are going to be those semi-periphery countries. So core tends to have zero population growth or negative population growth. Semi-periphery, they're still growing, but growing slowly, and then periphery countries is where we see the fastest population growth. And here in the United States and China, we both are experiencing RNI of 3, just whatever, trust me on the math there. But if we change the scale like we did before, then that changes what we are analyzing to be true about what's happening in the United States. So when you look at this map, what you're seeing here, red means population is growing, and the darkish blue area, so just really West Virginia, means the population is shrinking, and this is just births and deaths. So you can kind of gauge that like population growth and decline is not happening the same in all of the different regions here in the United States. Most of the population growth is actually happening in our biggest states, California and Texas. And then most of the rest of the United States is kind of like more in this area down here. So we're seeing like slower population growth or negative population growth. And then if you look just at Illinois, it's kind of the same thing. This is a really horrible comparison map because the colors are actually reversed. Here, the red equals slowest population, the blue equals fastest population growth. So don't worry about the colors. But again, just breaking it down by county, you can see that here, even in Illinois, there are areas of Illinois that are experiencing negative population growth, zero population growth, and then a positive population growth. So population is growing. Okay, so you're gonna be your first map analysis question. So I want you to compare these two maps and draw some conclusions. So we've been working a lot with using maps together to inform our understanding of a particular topic. So I want you to craft a statement that illustrates what's happening in the map. So what's the correlation? So you have children per childbearing years, where red is like more children being born, and then you have infant mortality rates, where red equals higher levels of infant mortality rates, more babies dying. So pause it and draw some conclusions. What do you notice when you compare these two maps? Okay. So one of the other things that's important to remember about population growth and where it's happening, and not something that we actually talked about yet, or I actually kind of did mention it, the world is becoming more and more urban. And what that means is that more and more people are actually moving into cities. And so I'm going to link this into and have you pause and like look at it. I'm going to link this very cool interactive timeline that shows you the growth of cities over time. And as you're watching it, this is where you are also going to be asked to answer a discussion question in your notes. Why might the growth of cities be problematic for countries that are seeing rapidly growing cities. And we haven't really talked about this, so it's kind of just a preview, but I want you to use logic and kind of think about it. Why might that be a problem? If there are a bunch of people moving into cities, what could be the problem that occurs as a result of that? Okay. And then because I think that this is also really important and it sets up the video that we're going to watch in just a minute, I want you to, this is a little bit of review. So another thing that you can look at in terms of population growth and or decline, these are consequences really. So GDP is something that we talked about when we talked about economic development. It's used to measure a nation's wealth. Poor countries have higher gross domestic product, which translates to higher GDP per capita, which means people make more money in poor countries, but we haven't really talked about energy consumption. So there's a couple of maps that I want you to compare and draw another conclusion. Energy consumption is the total number of energy used by each region divided by the number of people who are living in that region. So it's really interesting when you look at the wealthiest countries and their use of energy and the poorest countries and their use of energy. And remember, like energy is problematic if we're not using green energy, and the world is not using green energy yet. We are still getting a lot of our energy from nuclear or coal, and that's dirty to the environment. And so it's something to be thoughtful about, especially as we look at like things like sustainable development and things that we'll talk about a little bit later. So again, pause the video and draw some conclusion. This map over here talks about the richest country. So the darker the blue, the more wealthy the country, the lighter, the least wealthy the country. Here you're looking at energy use of oil. Okay, so like the darker darker the color red, the more energy that's being used. And then of course the lighter colors, the less energy that's being used. So go ahead and pause the video and draw some conclusions. What correlations can you make when you look at these two maps? All right, now this is, again, Hans Rosling. I can't get enough of this man. I've showed you several of his videos, but this one is called the Magic Washing Machine. And as you're looking at it, there's some instructions on your note-taking sheet as to what I want you to jot down in those boxes. So if you need to pause the video before you watch the video, pause it here. And then I'm just going to play it all the way through, and then we'll wrap up what you have to do next.
I was only 4 years old when I saw my mother load a washing machine for the very first time in her life. That was a great day for my mother. My mother and father had been saving money for years to be able to buy that machine. And the first day it was going to be used, even Grandma was invited to see the machine. And Grandma was even more excited. Throughout her life, she had been heating water with firewood, and she had hand-washed laundry for 7 children. And now she was going to watch electricity do that work. My mother carefully opened the door, and she loaded the laundry into the machine, like this. And then when she closed the door, Grandma said, no, let me push the button. And Grandma pushed the button. And she said, oh, fantastic, I want to see this. Give me a share, I want to see it. And she sat down in front of the machine and she watched the entire washing program. She was mesmerized. To my grandmother, the washing machine was a miracle. Today, in Sweden and other rich countries, people are using so many different machines. Look, the homes are full of machines. I can't even name them all, you know. And they also, when they want to travel, they use flying machines that can take them to remote destinations. And yet in the world, there are so many people who still heat the water on fire, and they cook their food on fire. Sometimes they don't even have enough food. And they live below the poverty line. There are 2 billion fellow human beings who live on less than $2 a day. And the richest people over there, there's 1 billion people, and they live above what I call the airline. because they have spent more than $80 a day, on their consumption. But this is just 1, 2, 3 billion people. And obviously there are 7 billion people in the world. So there must be 1, 2, 3, 4 billion people more who live in between the poverty line and the airline. They have electricity. But the question is, how many have washing machines? I've done a scrutiny of market data, and I found that indeed the washing machine has penetrated below the airline, and today there's an additional 1 billion people up there who live above the wash line. And they consume for more than $40 per day. So 2 billion have access to washing machine, and the remaining 5 billion, how do they wash? Or to be more precise, how do most of the women in the world wash? Because it remains a hard work for women to wash. They wash like this, by hand. It's a hard, time-consuming labor which they have to do for hours every week. And sometimes they also have to bring water from far away to do the laundry at home. Or they have to bring the laundry away to a stream far off. And they want the washing machine. They don't want to spend such a large part of their life doing this hard work with so relatively low productivity. And there's nothing different in their wish than it was for my grandma. Look here, 2 generations ago in Sweden, picking water from the stream, heating with firewood, and washing like that. They want the washing machine in exactly the same way. But when I lecture to environmentally concerned students, they tell me, no, everybody in the world cannot have cars and washing machines. How can we tell this woman that she ain't going to have a washing machine? And then I ask my students, I've asked them over the last 2 years, I've asked, how many of you doesn't use a car? And some of them proudly raise their hand, and say, I don't use a car. And then I put the really tough question. How many of you hand wash your jeans and your bed sheet? And no one raised their hand. Even the hardcore in the green movement use washing machine. So how come something that everyone used and they think others will not stop it? What is special with this? I had to do an analysis about the energy use in the world. Here we are. Look here. You see the 7 billion people up there? The air people, the wash people, the bulb people, and the fire people. One unit like this is an energy unit of fossil fuel, oil, coal, or gas. That's what most of the electricity and the energy in the world is. And it's 12 units used in the entire world. And the richest 1 billion, they use 6 of them. Half of the energy is used by 1/7 of the world population. And these ones who have washing machine, but not the house full of other machines, they use 2. And this group use 3, 1 each. And they just have electricity. And over there, they don't even use 1 each of them. That makes 12 of them. But the main concern for the environmentally interested students, and they are right, is about the future. What are the trends? If we just prolong the trends without any really advanced analysis to 2050, there are 2 things that can increase the energy use. First, population growth. Second, economic growth. Population growth will mainly occur among the poorest people here because they have high child mortality and they have many children per woman, and that you will get 2 extra, but that won't change the energy use very much. What will happen is economic growth. The best off here in the emerging economies, I call them the New East. They will jump the airline. Whoop, they will say, and they will start to use as much as the Old West are doing already. And these people, they want the washing machine. I told you, they'll go there, and they will double the energy use, and we hope that the poor people will get into the electric light, and they will get 2-child family without a stop in population growth, but the total energy consumption will increase to 22 units. And these 22 units, still the richest people use most of them. So what's needed to be done? Because the risk, the high probability of climate change is real. It's real. Of course, they must be more energy efficient. They must change behavior to some way. They must also start to produce green energy, much more green energy. But until they have the same energy consumption per person, they shouldn't give advice to others what to do and what not to do. Here we can get more green energy all over. This is what we hope may happen. It's a real challenge in the future. But I can assure you that this woman in the favela in Rio, she wants a washing machine. She's very happy about her Minister of Energy that provided electricity to everyone. So happy that she even voted for her, you know. And she became Dilma Rousseff, the president-elect of one of the biggest democracies in the world, you know, moving from Minister of Energy to president. If you have democracy, people will vote for washing machines. They love them. And what's the magic with it? My mother explained the magic with this machine the very, very first day. She said, now Hans, we have loaded the laundry. The machine will make the work. And now we can go to the library. Because this is the magic. You load the laundry, and what do you get out of the machine? You get books out of the machines. Children's books, and mother got time to read for me. She loved this. I got the ABC. This is why I started my career as professor, when my mother had time to read for me. And she also got books for herself. She managed to study English and learn that as a foreign language. And she read so many novels, so many different novels here, you know. And we really loved this machine. And what we said, my mother and me, thank you, industrialization. Thank you, steel mill. Thank you, power station. And thank you, chemical processing industry that gave us time to read books. Thank you very much.
Okay, so tons of crossover between the development unit and the population unit. So part of what we're going to talk about in this unit are some of the consequences of population growth, and this is a great example of what could happen when population grows and everybody begins to industrialize and societies become more modern. And you see more countries moving from the periphery to the semi-periphery, and from the semi-periphery, like China is moving currently, sort of towards the core. And so now, if you guys have finished your note-taking sheets, there's one other like you should have all of the definitions and everything filled in, because this is going to be your study guide essentially for the quiz that you're going to take. There'll be a couple other terms, but I'll make sure to give you exactly what terms you're going to be assessed on. But now I want to do some application. So there is a reading attached to your note-taking sheet. And I want you to think in terms of ESPN, which we've done some in the past, but we're going to continue using this as a strategy to analyze documents. So there's a question that you have to answer, and I want you to think through the question. You're going to have to use the reading to help you answer the question. What are the economic, social, and cultural and political factors that influence some of the statistics that we talked about? And the reading has some really good illustrations of how that happens. So once you are completely done with the note-taking sheet, I want you to turn it in so I can give you credit for participation today, because we're kind of asynchronous. I should be back to check on you by the end of the period. But go ahead and submit it. And then once it's submitted, when I come back in, or when next time I see you, essentially, we will go over any questions that you might have, okay? Sorry about the crazy noise that is happening. My daughter does not care that I'm filming, and yeah, I hope you guys have a good rest of your day.